Good morning, folks. Hopefully this will work. I'm getting more the hang of this. I don't have to go searching all over the place to find the program to make another video. My name is David Youngquist. I'm the publisher and president of Dark Continents Publishing. And I'm making a series of videos talking about the company, talking about books, talking about our authors. And I'll post them up on YouTube, and folks can either stumble across them as they randomly go through looking for videos of God knows what, or they can look me up or look up the links. We'll see what happens. So far, there's been a little success. Hopefully, I'm not looking to be a YouTube overnight sensation because, frankly, I don't like being on film. But I'm doing this to promote our books and our writers and their publishing house. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you a little discussion about a book that we have out by a British author by the name of Dave Jeffrey. The most current book that he has out is called Contamination, published by us in conjunction with Silent Studios of England, Daventry, England. Um, this is, whoops, there we go. This is Contamination. Um, it's a little bit of a different book. The story is a non-traditional zombie story. It's a story of infection spreading across England, driving people mad, mutating them, changing them into creatures that aren't supposed to exist. This particular copy that I have in my hand is going off to Rue Morgue magazine this morning, right after I get done taping this, for a review. So that may be a good thing. I'm hoping it is. I like the book. I think it's a good, fast-paced read. A little background on this book in particular. Silent Studios and Dark Continents Publishing got together this past early spring, winter if you want to call it that, and decided to form a partnership. And what this partnership is going to do is create a system in which books written by authors that either Jason Wright, who is the head of the Silent Studios, and I agree on, or an author that is looking to move a little bit forward in their careers. This is kind of a different concept of things. Hollywood is always saying, "Oh, we're out of ideas. We're out of ideas. We don't know what to write next." Which is why you have superhero movies. Which is why you have um, remakes of movies like Willy Wonka, um, and any other awful, horrible remake you want to mention. Um, Hollywood says running out of ideas. So what we did was Jason Wright got with Dave Jeffrey, who in turn they both got with me, and came up with this idea. Said, "Hey, why don't we get together? We'll have somebody write the book. In this case, Dave Jeffrey, and Dave's tapped to do a couple other books in this vein. You guys publish the book, and we'll make a movie out of it." Which is a great concept. If you think about it, that is very unique. I mean, there's not too many systems going on like that. Usually, in the case of something like World War Z, it has to get out there, and it has to sell a bazillion copies, and you have to get a major Hollywood studio interested in it, and then the Hollywood writers have to get involved, and they have to butcher the book, and they have to hire a big name actor like Brad Pitt. No offense, I like Brad Pitt's work, but they overhaul the entire book and turn it into something that it's not. Um, that's the biggest problem right now. This is taking a story idea from just concept through publication as a hardcover book into a film. It's a great way to do it. It's a great concept. I think there's a lot of future to it. If I hadn't been willing to roll the dice and take a shot on it, I think it would have probably died, or Jason would have gone and found somebody else. I believe that it is a truly great idea, and I think there's a lot of future in it. And I'm glad that Jason and I and Dave and the rest of our respective companies got in on this from the beginning. And I'm excited to see the direction it's going. A little more about Contamination. Contamination was a story idea that Jason Wright had and had worked up and had roughed out. Jason, being a movie person, a film person, screenwriter type person, had a good idea blocked out, but he didn't have it filled in with all the fine details that a writer can add to it. Well, he was introduced to Dave Jeffrey at a gathering, a zombie I think it was a zombie crawl. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure it was like a zombie crawl over in England. And they got talking about this concept of putting a movie together on books, and this is the result. Contamination was the first one that came about. Um, it's a very good book. It's very fast-paced. It's along the lines of a pulp-style book, in that it's fast action, fast-paced, fast-moving. It's a very slim book. It's not Stephen King going on and on and on and on and on for 800 pages. You know, this is fast action at its best. You get in there, the story sucks you in, you get involved with it, and you blast through it. Great book, great read. One thing also, people don't realize that there's such a vast difference in styles of writing in the English language, methods of writing in the English language, and just basic dialects. Um, One thing that I wanted to do, excuse me while I hit my addiction again, one thing I wanted to make sure of when we formed Dark Continents is to let English writers sound like English writers. Everybody from Adrian Chamberlain to Simon Kurt Unsworth to Dave Jeffrey are British writers that have published books with us. I wanted to ensure that that stayed the same. I didn't want to water down a British author and make them sound like Thurston Howell III, okay, for reference point. You know, an East Coast blue blood that was walking around so tight he couldn't bend over, you know what I'm saying? I wanted the Brits to sound like Brits. I wanted the Americans to sound like Americans. I wanted, in this case, we have Australians and South Africans in the company. I wanted them to sound like their native speaking and native writing voices. I think this gives American audiences a very unique opportunity, a very unusual opportunity in today's publishing world to hear other voices that they may not be familiar with, other takes on their own language, other styles of writing other than straightforward American Tom Clancy, Joe Conrad, Stephen King, you name it. I mean, there's great American writers out there. Do not get me wrong. I love American writing. But I also grew up reading a lot of British writers. Everything from James Herriot to Peter Hathaway Capstick to Sherlock Holmes stories. Okay, I grew up on all that stuff. Piers Anthony. I grew up on all that stuff. So I know that there are some fantastic British writers out there, but there's not that many out there in the American market outside of Clive Barker right now. And I love Clive for it too. So that's what I wanted to do. Contamination is a very thorough, very fast-paced zombie mutation pulp style book. I think it's a great read. Otherwise, we wouldn't have even bothered to put it out. Otherwise, we wouldn't have even bothered to put the contract together with Silent Studios. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a few pages so you can actually hear, granted, through a Midwest American voice, the sound of a true British book. And hopefully you folks will want to go out and buy a copy of Contamination, either from the website at www.darkcontinents.com or Amazon, or even better, walk into your Barnes & Noble and say, hey, can you get this book for me? Do you have it on your shelf? Or in the case of England or overseas, walk into Big Green or Forbidden Planet and say, hey, by the way, I hear there's this great book called Contamination out. Would you folks be having it on your shelves at all? You know, see what happens. If you don't want to buy it online, you want to buy it from a brick and mortar store and support those kind of shops, walk in and ask for it, and they can either order it or possibly stock it on the shelf. Excuse me. I'll go ahead and read a couple pages, and then I'll let you folks decide on your own. Okay, Contamination by Dave Jeffrey. The main protagonist's name is Dean Sharp. He is a journalist working on some stories, and he doesn't realize that he has basically become part of the story himself. This part of it, where I'm going to read, is where he first discovers what is actually going on out there. Dean peered into the opening, trepidation making movement hesitant. A short corridor lay ahead, lit by stark fluorescence. Something else kept him standing in the doorway. The air smelled bad. A fundamental, fetid stink that had his stomach rolling. He covered his mouth with a hand, the thumb and index fingers squeezing his nostrils closed as he breathed through pursed lips. The corridor opened out at the far end. Even from a distance of 20 feet, he could see the surgical tables and cabinets of a laboratory. And even more unsettling, the tables were occupied. Again, intrigue overcame fear, and Dean crept down the corridor until he was able to see the entire lab. It was a huge room, easily 40 feet square, and filled with a dizzying array of sights, a sensory overload of horror that for a moment had him bring up his other hand to plug the vomit threatening to rise from his belly. He closed his eyes to give his mind time to adjust, but the images were branded into his brain. 3 of the walls comprised holding pens, and the glass doors were daubed with red and brown streaks. Beyond this vivid curtain, things moved, and he had difficulty making them out. Deep down, he knew what he'd seen inside the pens and could not be categorized, since fringe science had been playing merrily down here in the bowels of air. This was borne out by the lab tables standing between him and the holding pens. Several of them, each occupied with things that had started out as human beings. Yet what was left was difficult to fathom. You could see naked torsos and limbs, the flesh about them ruddy and sporting livid scratches and surgical slashes. Abdomens had been opened out so that the world could look in, the skin peeled back and held in place by a haphazard line of fat staples which puckered the fat and muscle. Stomach cavities disgorged thick, black pipes that ran into 5 demijohns, each filled with a green, viscous fluid. Each table played host to similar atrocities, all with their innards being fed by piping in racks of bottles, and this was not the only thing they had in common. Mercifully, every cadaver had its face covered with a white sheet. Dean's macabre sense of curiosity pulled him closer. He focused on the flimsy cloth covering the head of the occupant at the nearest table. His feet squeaked on the linoleum. He fought to ignore the gaping hole in the chest to his left and the pipe spilling from it. With a trembling hand, he lifted the sheet and peered underneath. Jesus fucking Christ! He staggered away from the table, backing into a trolley that clanged noisily against the wall. Dean's hand remained enmeshed in the sheet and dragged it with him as he inadvertently unveiled the monstrosity to the room. There was a head, there was a face, but it didn't belong. It didn't fit in the way nature intended. In fact, what had been exposed was an assault on convention. Mother Nature dragged him into darkness and raped the dirty, clamped hand over her mouth. There was a human torso, a human neck, but beyond that, the head belonged to a wolf. Its mouth was pulled back into a leer. A long, pink tongue rolled from its plinth, rolled onto the plinth supporting its muzzle. There was a hyphened line of sutures at the stump of the dirty brown neck, attaching beast to man. Yet Dean was both reviled and fascinated. When the creature's eyes fluttered open, a weak, pathetic whimper emerged from the muzzle. Dean thought sanity had gone on a field trip. The bastard creation of science was alive. It was weak and incapacitated, but it lived as any other creature. He sought purchase on the trolley behind him, and his splayed fingers caught something heavy. He tore his gaze away from the incredible sight languishing on the table and saw a bulky and battered leather-brown book. There was no lettering on its cover, just a crisscross of creases. He lifted the book, the leather greasy under his touch, and the sharp, pungent odor rose from the cover, wrinkling his nostrils. He flipped open the pages. Dean scanned a variety of meticulous, detailed drawings furnished in both pencil and ink. Many of them were anatomical diagrams of the creatures about him. Others were cross-sections of cells and tissue. All of them were accompanied by a fine, flowing script. The pages were a work of art, but of a terrible sort, the kind that belied the blurring of madness and genius. And when Dean rifled through the journal and found the signature on the first page, this gained even greater clarity. Professor Jonathan Green. Well, well, Dean mused, the awful sights now forgotten as the journalist inside him called up for duty. You old bastard, he whispered. So this is what you've been hiding. This is what you've been doing. Okay, that's my take on contamination. And I'll get used to this camera sooner or later. If you'd like a copy, you can go to our website. You can go to Amazon. You can walk into a bookstore and order them. I hope you enjoyed my first reading, and I promise I'll get better. Until the next time, folks, excuse me. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.